I cannot believe that in the year 2 AC, after coronavirus, people out here still believe that depression is caused by a chemical imbalance. It's not people's fault that they think that, and I can't get mad at them. It's the psychiatrist's fault. And in order to understand why this is, you need to understand how it is that people get diagnosed with depression. When someone decides to go see a therapist or psychiatrist, it's usually after they've considered all other options and they've reached a point where they can no longer ignore their symptoms. They've tried talking with friends and family, they may seek the counsel of a religious leader or a life coach, and some people even change their diets hoping to get relief from the personal relationship they have with the feeling that we call depression. But none of these things work. The reason for this is because if you ask a depressed person why they are depressed, they will often respond with, "I don't know." But an obvious truth that most people overlook is that just because you don't know something doesn't mean that there isn't an answer, and even if you think you do know something, which is synonymous with belief, that doesn't mean it's true. Imagine you host a house party with friends and you decide to engage in recreational drug usage responsibly. Before the party, you take everyone's keys and put them in a time-locked safe, set it for the morning, and start doing all the drugs. After about 2 hours, everyone's in an altered state and one person decides that they feel sober enough to drive home. You tell them that you've thrown their keys outside and if they can find them, they can leave. Now, let us also imagine that you live on a dark street with only one street lamp. As you go outside to watch your friend and make sure they don't hurt themselves, you notice that they only seem to search in the area that's illuminated by the light. They continue to do this for an entire hour, searching in the same area over and over and over again, even though there's an entire street to look through. You ask them, "Why is it that you keep searching in this same spot?" And they say to you, "Well, because this is where the light is." Because they know that their keys are outside and they are too intoxicated to remember that you took them, they will keep searching over and over and over again until they either give up or get sober. But unless they remember their childhood unless they remember that you have their keys, they will continue looking for a solution in a place it can't be found. Giving them a flashlight is a nice gesture though. The same thing happens with depression. Either a chemical imbalance causes depression in your brain that makes you sad when you should be happy, or there is a reason for your depression that is so obvious in your life that you're overlooking it, often because you don't think it's a big enough deal to cause depression. Sometimes the reason is outside of your control. Being American and dealing with COVID-19 and the associated isolation is enough reason for most people to develop depression. You should feel depressed that you can't do the things you used to do. You should not be finding enjoyment in things you used to enjoy, and I expect everyone to have some passive suicidal ideation, such as not wanting to wake up in the morning. There is nothing that we can do except wait for vaccines to be developed, wait for more competent leadership, and find ways to cope with uncertainty. Sometimes the reason is too taboo to be spoken, such as noticing that the person that you promised to have and to hold until death do you part has started to gain weight, and you have no idea how to tell them that you're not sexually attracted to them anymore. You don't want to be the person who divorces their partner because of how they look, and also the way that they look affects your ability to be intimate with them. You can't have a headache every night, and being able to say "I'm clinically depressed" might be the magic spell you need to buy you some time. Sometimes it's looking down at the face of your newborn baby and feeling nothing when the world tells you that it should be the happiest moment of your life. You've never really thought through the choice of having children, and you've always heard that it's different once it's your child. When everyone around you is filled with joy, who can you tell that you regret the decision to become a parent while realizing you've just basically signed an 18-year contract? What kind of mom must you be that you don't feel love for your child? Most people not faking depression for the social, economic, and relational benefits would never burden their friends with this type of knowledge. But if you did, most good friends would try to cheer you up. If you were to tell a religious leader, they might give you scriptures, verses, or other spiritual coping skills to attempt to cheer you up. Even a life coach coach will motivate, push, and coach you to cheer up, but that's partly because they have no formal training on how to do anything else, and anything else for a life coach would be practicing therapy without a license. Even though cheer up is well-meaning advice and can be packaged in friendly, religious, and coaching language, it basically amounts to the same message. You should not feel depressed, which is exactly what the person experiencing depression is telling themselves about their own depression. Society helps with this too. There are many happiness and wellness cults whose solutions amount to little more than stick your head in the sand until things get better. Life coaches work by bullying you into happiness. The exorbitant fees for cheerleading also motivate you to accept your depressive situation sooner, which is why most life coaches abandon their depressed clients by referring them to a therapist. Speaking of things that don't work, cognitive behavioral therapy is useless for some people because the reason for their depression is not all in their head. It's all outside of it. But these approaches make them believe otherwise. Oh, you're just engaging in black and white thinking. You have unresolved attachment issues, or that's just your depression talking, which honestly is a phrase that makes no sense outside the context of a therapy office. These therapies do little more than gaslight you into believing that the reason for your depression is all your fault. After sustained gaslighting by friends, family, and society at large, the depressed person starts to accept everyone's message. I shouldn't be depressed. And this causes significant ramifications for their behavior at work, school, or at home. They succumb to social pressure and start to act as if I shouldn't be depressed, and start searching for reasons not to be depressed, and behaving as if the way they feel isn't right. Acting in this way, pretending to not be depressed, takes a significant amount of physical and mental energy to sustain. This is where the classic symptoms of depression come from. Imagine being an actor who never steps out of their role and isn't being paid for it. I'd be sluggish too. A person can go a very long time looking for reasons to not be depressed, and they will provide temporary relief until one day something happens. Whether it is seriously entertaining suicidal thoughts, whether it's a manic break because of a momentary but fleeting realization that none of this is their fault, or maybe coercion by a concerned or abusive parent, but the person ends up in a psychiatrist's office, and for the first time, someone tells them that not only are they clinically depressed, the word clinically is signifying something serious, but that it isn't their fault and the way they feel is normal because they have a chemical imbalance, and they don't need to fear because if they take this depression drug, in 2 weeks, they will start to feel better. Now you have to understand the state the depressed person is in at this moment. They've tried everything and are at their wits' end. They are vulnerable and open to anything that explains their feelings without actually pointing out the obvious truth, which is that depression is a normal response to situations that you feel hopeless in. And some people are unwilling or unable to accept the reality of those situations, even if the situation that you feel hopeless in is life itself. The average visit to a psychiatrist is something around 15 to 25 minutes, which is not enough time to even begin that discussion. So when a psychiatrist, basically God, gives them such a simple answer to a complex problem, and also a different message, you should be depressed, and the chemical imbalance is why, and they package it up in a fancy sounding serious name like Major Depressive Disorder, and also provide a simple solution, take this pill, the depressed person for the first time in a long time feels validated and also has something to believe in. So they get their script and start taking their medicine, and then the side effects come, which you would think would be a signal that this foreign chemical in our brain is causing issues. But to a depressed person, the side effects mean that it's working. And there are a myriad of side effects that go along with starting and stopping depression medication called SSRI syndrome, which unfortunately for some people just provides more evidence that the depression drug is working. I've experienced SSRI syndrome myself. In fact, it left me with permanent tinnitus in both of my ears. The best way to describe the acute symptoms though is like a bomb going off in your head. Sometimes you can look too quickly in one direction and you'll feel a tiny electric shock. Sometimes you audibly hear clicks, pops, and explosions. The psychiatric community only recently accepted that SSRI syndrome is true, and before this, these experiences were further proof for the depression. Also, almost every depression drug has depression and suicidality as a side effect. Depression drugs sometimes work because they make you feel less depressed about killing yourself, and you go through with it. Anyway, depression drugs will numb you to the experiences around you. Still, just like any drug, it takes more and more to get the desired effect. And just like our man searching in the street for his keys, depression medication cannot, nor will it ever, cure your depression, because your depression is a reflection of the depressive situation you are in at school, work, or at home. That is why depression drugs work until they don't. Depression drugs can't change your situation. Y'all, depression is not caused by no damn chemical imbalance. And what's crazy is now they moving away from that. Go look at modern depression treatments. They have this thing where they like stimulate your brain with like magnetic waves. There are things you can wear on your wrist. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Y'all, depression is a normal bodily response. There is something going on in your environment, and just because you want to ignore it doesn't mean that your body is going to. And that's what all of this is. All of these illnesses can be looked at as sometimes people don't pay attention to the signals that are coming from their body. On top of that, capitalism relabels those feelings as symptoms, and then they tell you that you need to take this pill in order to make it go away. You should feel depressed. How would someone know if they were in an abusive relationship? You need to feel some way about it. Otherwise, it's like sticking your hand on a stove and letting your hand stay there, but taking some pain medicine so it doesn't hurt so much. No, remove your hand from the stove. You got to get out of the situations that's causing you depression. But people ain't ready for that conversation, especially when the situation that's causing you depression is life itself. Now, we just have to have some adult conversations. How can we make this life more comfortable so that people don't want to leave it? No one's ready for that conversation. 13 reasons why. One of the reasons is because this place is a hellscape to live in, but we'll talk about that at a later date. See y'all.